From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the program. Today we look at Donald Trump's deportation plans, which are moving full speed ahead. Meanwhile, his new initiative, the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, take their message to Capitol Hill. We've got all the details, but first, a look at the headlines. Rebels capture the city of Hama in central Syria as they march toward the capital, Damascus. The rebels say their plan is to overthrow Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. China accuses the United States of meddling in its internal affairs. The accusation comes after Taiwan's president Lai Ching-te returns to the country after making stopovers in both Hawaii and Guam. Tens of thousands of South Koreans pledged to rally in the capital, Seoul, on Saturday. The protests are directed at President Yoon Suk-yeol for declaring martial law in the country earlier this week. Clashes between protesters and police officials leave at least 5 dead and several wounded in several cities across Mozambique. This as opposition parties accuse the ruling government of voter fraud in the October 9th presidential election. And NASA delays its Artemis moon landing mission until mid-2027 amid anticipated policy changes in the wake of Donald Trump's return to the White House. The United States last sent astronauts to the moon in 1972. We begin in the United States. President-elect Donald Trump's team is making a list of nations to which migrants will be deported if their home countries refuse to accept them. This list reportedly includes the Bahamas, a tourist hotspot in the Caribbean that has now rejected the president-elect's proposal. The Bahamas says it does not have the resources to accept deportation flights of migrants from other countries.
The Office of the Prime Minister wishes to address recent reports regarding a proposal from the Trump transition team in the United States for the Bahamas to accept deportation flights of migrants from other countries. This matter was presented to the government of the Bahamas, but was reviewed and firmly rejected by the Prime Minister. Since the Prime Minister's rejection of this proposal, there has been no further engagement or discussions with the Trump transition team or any other entity regarding this matter.
Now, apart from the Bahamas, Donald Trump's list of reportedly includes Mexico, Panama, Grenada, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. The plan could mean that thousands of migrants are permanently deported from the United States to countries they have no connection with. Now, it's unclear whether these migrants would be able to legally work and live in the countries to which they are in fact deported. Meanwhile, Donald Trump would force these countries to agree to his proposal. How he would do so remains a mystery. But what is clear is that the incoming president is adamant about expelling millions of people living in the United States illegally.
The United States is now an occupied country, but it will soon be an occupied country no longer. Not going to be happening. Not going to be happening. On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out. I will rescue every city and town that has been invaded and conquered, and we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail. We're going to kick them the hell out of our country as fast as possible.
The incoming Trump administration has also vowed to round up and deport foreigners belonging to rival countries like China. Meanwhile, Mexico is hoping to strike a deal with Donald Trump to limit non-Mexican deportees it could receive from the United States.
Obviously, we stand in solidarity with everyone, but our main purpose is to receive Mexicans, and we hope to reach an agreement with the Trump administration so that, in case these massive deportations happen, they send people from other countries directly to their countries of origin.
Notably, the U.S.-Mexico border has become a place where migrants from around the world are gathering with hopes of crossing into the United States. And experts estimate that around 4 million Mexicans currently live in the United States without proper documentation and face the threat of deportation. Hence, Mexico cannot afford to exhaust its resources over non-Mexican deportees, as those would be needed to accommodate its own citizens.
I think this immigration policy proposed by the President Claudia Sheinbaum is much more complex than that of the previous government. Still, we do not know anything. There is no support. There is no government presence in accompanying these caravans.
The way I see it, Donald Trump is pressuring her, because Claudia Sheinbaum is not going to say something like that on her own initiative. That's because Trump is pressuring her to say things.
And like any other country, Mexico is not obligated to accept third country deportees. However, it has agreed to do so in the past. The migrants Mexico accepted hailed from countries like Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, and Nicaragua, which are difficult for Washington to approach directly due to diplomatic or political reasons. And staying in the United States, billionaire duo Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who have been tasked with leading Donald Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, visited Capitol Hill on Thursday. Musk and Ramaswamy arrived to meet with Republican lawmakers in both chambers of Congress and find ways to cut unnecessary federal expenses. House Speaker Mike Johnson said Thursday's huddle was a brainstorming session to lay the groundwork for next year.
I know you're all excited that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have joined us today. This is an important day. It's the beginning of a journey. You've heard what DOGE is all about, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's a new thing. And this is a new day in Washington and a new day in America. We have long lamented the size and scope of the government, that it has grown too large. And let me be frank about this. Government is too big, it does too many things, and it does almost nothing well. And the taxpayers deserve better. They deserve a more responsive government, a more efficient government, one that is leaner and more focused on its primary objectives.
Both Musk and Ramaswamy delivered roughly a minute of remarks each, but disclosed little to nothing about how they plan to in fact slash federal waste. So far, the duo plan to impose a 5-day work week that would result in voluntary terminations, shift some federal departments outside Washington, and axe some government agencies.
Will there be changes made to defense spending? Will there be changes made to entitlement programs like Medicare and Social Security, which are the biggest drivers of government spending at this stage? Those reducing cost of those programs are something that could be very detrimental to lawmakers in the 2026 elections. And so we'll see how politically popular some of the recommendations are as members of the House run again in 2026, and as many senators will be up for re-election as well.
Meanwhile, Musk's 4-year-old son stole the spotlight as he sat atop his father's shoulders while striding through the Capitol. Now, Musk and Ramaswamy have been appointed to head the department, which is not a federal agency and will work from outside the government. They will be issuing recommendations to overhaul bureaucracy and the federal budget with a self-imposed deadline of July 6, 2026. While Republicans love this idea, it's no secret that previous presidents and Congress under both parties have repeatedly failed to deliver on this goal. Reports say once DOGE is established, Ramaswamy and Musk will have a small staff of about 10 to 12 who will work closely with the Office of Budget and Management. Now, the Tesla CEO, with the backing of Donald Trump, has set a target of $2 trillion in savings without mentioning whether it would come in a single year or over a long period. In the most recent fiscal year, the United States government spent $6.8 trillion. The U.S. prison system is coming under heavy fire, and the Federal Bureau of Prisons is closing FCI Dublin, a well-known California prison, after years of reported sexual abuse against incarcerated women by prison guards. Now, alongside the Golden State Prison, 6 more facilities are closing down due to staffing shortages. What do these closures mean for inmates and staff? Here's a story with more.
The U.S. prison system has long been hidden behind steel bars and locked gates, but the darkness inside is now impossible to ignore. This week, the Federal Bureau of Prisons announced the permanent closure of FCI Dublin, the low-security women's prison situated in the Golden State, California. The prison has long been famous for years of abuse and scandal. Known grimly as a rape club, the prison at one time housed over 30,000 employees, 158,000 inmates on an annual budget of $8 billion. However, after years of rampant abuse that involved the guards, the prison's warden and inmates, the Federal Bureau of Prisons announced its closure. As for the accused, over 20 staff members now face investigations. At least 7 have been convicted of sexual misconduct. Survivors, on the other hand, describe constant fear, retaliation, and a system that looked the other way.
There was not a minute where you felt safe in that institution. But I'm very concerned for what these closures mean for everyone. They're just putting band-aids on everything. The culture is ingrained in the BOP, and we don't see the willingness to make the changes that need to happen. BOP as an institution has proven it cannot keep people safe.
This closure, however, is just one part of a sweeping shakeup. The Federal Bureau of Prisons is shutting down 6 other facilities, citing critical staffing shortages, decaying infrastructure, and lack of funding. Minimum security prison camps in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Florida will also shutter their doors. Officials cite the physical conditions of these prisons are appalling. At the Duluth camp in Minnesota, condemned buildings contain asbestos and lead paint. At the Pensacola camp in Florida, facilities owned by the U.S. Navy are in such shambles that demolition is the only option. Dublin in California itself would require extensive, costly repairs to reopen. Meanwhile, decades of staffing shortages and mandatory overtime have stretched workers to the breaking point. Yet, while prisons close, the trauma persists. Many survivors of Dublin's abuse were transferred to distant facilities, far from their families and communities. Advocates report survivors struggle with depression and lack access to proper trauma-informed care.
The transfers were horrific. Nothing is getting better where they are. They're not able to get any kind of trauma-informed care. They're really struggling. I'm seeing huge levels of depression. It makes me feel guilty for being able to be out here and get the help I need.
Ironically, even as the BOP deactivates these facilities, it's building a $500 million prison in Kentucky. Critics call it misplaced priority. And advocates are arguing, urging President Joe Biden to grant clemency to those who have suffered abuse, a move that would send a powerful message after the controversial pardon of his son. So while closing Dublin may seem like progress, the problem runs deeper. The Senate has reported sexual abuse at most women's prisons in the United States, and corruption festers at every level.
And now moving to South America, in a bold move, Paraguay has expelled a senior Chinese diplomat for allegedly interfering in the country's internal affairs. In a stern statement, Paraguay's foreign minister revoked the visa of Chinese envoy Xu Wei and gave him just 24 hours to leave the country. A Sun Siyong accused the diplomat sent by Beijing of giving Paraguay a moral lecture on its ties with Taiwan. The Chinese official also attempted to influence Paraguay's lawmakers by urging them to ditch ties with Taiwan and embrace the One China policy. But after being declared persona non grata, the Chinese envoy pleaded that he was just attending a UNESCO meeting in Paraguay's capital.
My purpose for this visit is to fill in the gap in my map, the one in Latin America called Paraguay, which is in the heart of South America. Currently, there is almost no direct trade or exports from Paraguay to China. It's a great shame. Paraguayans are giving away their profits to intermediaries, but with diplomatic relations with China, you could earn more.
Now, the Chinese diplomat was already warned over his questionable activities after he skipped the UNESCO event despite insisting that he would be present at the meeting. Instead, the Chinese envoy was seen giving interviews to the media where he urged the country to end all relations with Taiwan.
As for the One China principle, it is a political principle and cannot be negotiated. In other words, in this case, it is not an option to choose China and Taiwan, but between China or Taiwan. In my case, I recommend that the government of Paraguay make the right decision as soon as possible.
Now, after the Chinese diplomat's dismissal, Paraguay's senators said they won't be lectured by Beijing into ending ties with Taiwan and prefer dialogue over arm twisting. Meanwhile, Paraguay's foreign minister said Taiwan was a dependable ally and a trusted old friend.
The relation between Paraguay and Taiwan is based on principles and values: democracy, freedom, human rights, and we are working very close with the Taiwan government in several issues in cooperation about education, health, development, and also working on safety, security issues that is quite important between our two countries. That is not because the United States is asking Paraguay to keep the relation with Taiwan. That is a very important decision of the government of Paraguay, and the people of Paraguay like very much Taiwan. That is the reality that we have in front of us.
Now, out of the 33 nations in Latin America and the Caribbean, only 7 countries recognize Taiwan and have formal relations with the island nation. In fact, in recent years, several South American countries have cut ties with Taiwan over pressure from Beijing. In fact, the United States also follows the One China policy and does not recognize Taiwan as an independent state. However, in recent years, Washington's tone has shifted dramatically and has now adopted a policy of providing lethal weapons to Taiwan for self-defense in case of Chinese aggression. And finally, from Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who was once celebrated for his charisma and vision, now finds himself at a crossroads. After nearly a decade in power, his leadership faces mounting criticism both at home and abroad, from strained relations with India to domestic challenges like inflation and housing affordability. Canadians are questioning whether Prime Minister Trudeau is still the leader they need. As the 2025 federal election approaches, many Canadians are looking for change. Here's our final report with more.
Justin Trudeau once captured Canada's imagination. Just like any other leader, he promised change and progress. Nearly a decade into his tenure, the sheen has worn off, and Canadians now see a Prime Minister who struggles to lead at home and abroad. Nowhere is this more evident than in his handling of India, a nation whose ties with Canada have sunk to historic lows. The trouble began in September 2023 when Trudeau alleged that Indian agents were involved in the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The Canadian leader called his claims credible allegations, but failed to present any evidence.
I think it's extremely important that as a country with a strong and independent justice system, we allow those justice processes to unfold themselves with the utmost integrity. But I can assure you, the decision to share these allegations on the floor of the House of Commons Monday morning was not done lightly.
Months later, his rhetoric remains unsubstantiated, with accusations now described as possibly, if not probably, true. India dismissed the allegations as baseless and tensions escalated. But Trudeau and his government didn't stop there. Pouncing on another opportunity to blame India, Canada recently accused India of orchestrating violence against Khalistani groups. New Delhi, in turn, responded sharply, summoning a Canadian diplomat and warning of consequences.
Regarding latest Canadian target, we had summoned the representative of the Canadian High Commission yesterday. A diplomatic note was handed over in reference to the proceedings of the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security in Ottawa on October 29th, 2024. It was conveyed in the note that the Government of India protests in the strongest terms to the absurd and baseless references made to the Union Home Minister of India before the committee by Deputy Minister David Morrison. In fact, the revelation that high Canadian officials deliberately leak unfounded insinuations to the international media as part of a conscious strategy to discredit India and influence other nations only confirms the view Government of India has long held about current Canadian government's political agenda and behavioral pattern. Such irresponsible actions will have serious consequences for bilateral ties.
This ongoing diplomatic standoff has polarized Canadians. A survey by the Angus Reid Institute revealed that 39% of Canadians believe Trudeau has mismanaged his ties with India. Only 32% think his government handled the situation well. And the same survey showed that nearly 29% feel relations with India won't improve while Trudeau is in office. Now, the growing divide isn't just about foreign policy. Trudeau's handling of domestic issues has also left Canadians frustrated. Inflation, unaffordable housing, and immigration-driven job shortages dominate public concerns. His approval ratings have also plummeted to 30%, with 65% of Canadians now disapproving of his performance. Trudeau's domestic failures mirror his international struggles. By-election losses have weakened his party, and dissatisfaction among Liberal MPs is brewing.
I think caucus is nervous because of the polling that's been constantly going down. Trudeau has to start listening. Listening to the people. If the Prime Minister doesn't respond in some way, what happens when the next confidence vote comes before the House of Commons?
It is evident that Trudeau's once untouchable persona is now under siege, and Canadians see his anti-India rhetoric as a desperate distraction from scandals and crises at home. Once hailed as a progressive leader, Trudeau now stands on shaky ground. His leadership has faltered, and Canadians are growing impatient. Diplomatic failures, domestic crisis, and internal party rebellions paint a grim picture. As the 2025 federal election looms, the sentiment is clear. Canada is ready for change. Justin Trudeau's once bright legacy is fading, leaving a nation eager for stronger leadership and a fresh start.
That's our show for today. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We hope you have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you right back here on Monday. Thanks for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join